That's not from us. That's from like the robotics company that worked here before us.
They were bronies?
They were. Come on.
They made brony robots?
I think all they ever wanted to do was make brony robots.
But yeah, the Xbox Infinity bizarre. What is it? I've heard names. I've heard Xbox, just plain Xbox. I've heard Infinity. I saw that on Reddit or something. I don't know if I was somebody making it up. There's
I've been hearing Infinity.
There's Durango. If they call it Infinity,
I can't wait to play Destiny on my Infinity.
It plays off of both 360 and Windows 8. I think that the danger is if they go with the Infinity, that means that they really are into the Windows 8 aspect, which I think might be of concern to some. I like the idea of just straight Xbox.
yeah, I think that's a good one.
I mean, Apple's done very well with iPad.
Yeah.
You know, it's sensible.
I think the Wii U would have done a lot better if they just called it Nintendo.
Or console.
Yeah.
Just call it a Nintendo, yeah. I don't know, I'm really excited. This year is full of like so much
I'm
of that
so
like,
excited.
gamer anticipation.
Oh my god.
And it's so nice because once the 21st happens, we can talk about all things.
Yeah.
Rather than like some things and things we don't know anything about that we kind of know about, but we can't talk about them like we know about them.
Okay, so I just want to ask you have been watching these console releases and reveals and everything in a professional capacity for a long time now. PlayStation had like a really good reveal, I thought. A really good like announcement press conference. Like if you're Xbox and you know what PlayStation did with their conference.
You mean PlayStation 2 or PlayStation 1?
No, the PS4 announcement.
Okay,
yeah. If you're Xbox, if you're Microsoft and you know what happened in that reveal and you know that Nintendo's got nothing coming up.
Yeah.
What do you put in? What's the focus in your press conference?
At E3 or at this thing on the 21st?
At this thing on the 21st.
See, this is it's tricky because they could do it where they talk less about games. That this is the entertainment aspect. I mean, I'm sure we're going to be presented with a large set-top box that plays games. It's just like the hub of your entertainment. I mean, this has been the dream of Microsoft for time immemorial. But I hope they don't segregate entertainment and games and hold games till E3.
Yeah.
But I think there's a very good chance. I think that they really look like they have the support of a lot of affiliates, be it a Netflix, be it, you know, say HBO or something like that. That would be kind of the wow factor that would trump what I thought Sony did an excellent job saying, we are talking to game developers, this is designed for gamers.
But do you think like to come out afterwards, because there's been a lot of like people have been thinking recently that Microsoft's been leaning too much on the living room thing at all. And a lot of people are kind of like getting a little weary of that. Like, I'm so
scared of it.
Do you think that they're going to come out and lead with entertainment after seeing Sony just be like game after game after game after game?
It's only because I think Microsoft would have already considered doing that prior to Sony making their announcement, and Microsoft is not a company that goes, hold on, let's change things. I think that they would all be aware that this might be a problem for them, but they're just kind of like holding hands on the conveyor belt like those characters in Toy Story 3.
I feel like Microsoft says, hold on, let's change things, and it's like the train in Back to the Future 2. You know, it's just like, oh God, are we gonna make the speed? Can we not make the speed?
3.
Like 3. Thank you.
Yeah, you messed up.
I messed up real bad.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what's funny is that the stakes feel so high, and I've been going back to like other launches around this time where, and typically you would learn about it, I won't say a year and a half out at E3, and that now we're looking at this shorter window, but everything feels more important. It's like when the NBA season is cut in half, and every game actually has some, like, it actually matters. That's how it feels now, and because I was thinking like, GameCube, even like PS2.
It's hard
it was
to
like,
do
it was
a launch
cool,
well.
and you got excited.
Well,
you really only saw the positive, and here
Yeah.
we see like all the threat and danger.
What I think was interesting going back is you had less of a regular cycle. I mean, things were kind of just popping up here and there, and at the same time, there also wasn't the internet. So, like, looking back, if you trace back through the generations of consoles, like, they would just kind of release something when it was done. They'd be like, hey, we made this box that you can play games on. It's like a Nintendo, but you're gonna forget its name soon.
Yeah, the first time I remember this sort of like lockstep in like getting all the new consoles out within the same window was like Dreamcast PS2. Like that's the first time I really remember it being like, we've got to be on par here.
Because the Saturn just kind of came out.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
It's like, I'm here, and everyone, we don't care.
The first time I remember it being a thing, and it's, of course, this is all filtered through my toddler's mind, but it was 1996, and then N64 came out, and it was like, this was Nintendo's third console, like, and it was in 3D, and we were like, what is this craziness? Computers can't even do this, but now you can buy a box that has a weird 3-pronged controller that can do amazing things.
Yeah.
And before it even was out, like I went to a cyber cafe in Harvard Square because I was visiting Cambridge.
Because that's where you get internet.
Right, yeah, that's
where else do you get internet?
One of the 4 places on the Eastern Seaboard where they had internet was one of these, the Cyber Cafe. But no, and they had a couple N64 set up, and I was like, it was like seeing a movie before it was out. Like I went back to my class and I was like, yeah, I played Pilot Wings.
God, Pilot Wings.
I played Mario 64. They're like, how was it? I was like, you guys aren't ready.
And then when you got your N64, you played Pilot Wings and Mario for a real long time.
No. When you got your N64, you had your stepdad drive you to Radio Shack to buy an RF adapter because your TV did not have an RCA output.
I worked at a game store.
You're right.
I worked at a game store the Christmas that the N64 came out, and we were like playing. We were like playing Japanese Mario 64. Like we had to do that thing where you drill into the cartridges to make it work with like the American prongs, and like it was awesome. And I remember it actually being the first time that I felt terrible having a job and being a part of commerce, because it was like a little independent mom and pop shop, and they knew that they were one of the last N64s in in our town, and they did like an auction. They basically like price gouged.
Damn.
They just held it back there, and
there was no
eBay
come back then. It's not like it's any different now.
We sold it to this person, I think, for $550.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And that's like 1996 money too.
Yeah.
That's like worth like $4 billion now.
I felt
that's
like
a $300 of today's money.
But that's how much people wanted this new thing, and I feel like we don't get as excited now, do we? Like.
Okay, well, hold on. So you worked at this store. I'm actually kind of foggy on this. The PlayStation, the original PlayStation came out before the N64,
that was out,
right?
Yeah. The Saturn was out.
Like, it was eventually the thing that I was more into. Like, I liked that was like what the kids got, and they were like, oh. And it's like, it's a cool system. Like, it still plays 3D games. It's got all these great games for it.
Of course,
the first few dozen launch titles just look like
that's
kind of really weirdly busy Super Nintendo games.
If you got a PlayStation, I think most people got their PlayStations with a game called Crazy Ivan. And Crazy Ivan was this like terrible slow mech game. Do you remember? It was like a Western style mech game, and it was Russian. It was awful. It was the worst
Tekken
game.
or Virtua Fighter? It was one of those.
Tekken.
It was Tekken.
Virtua Fighter 2.
That's when you started to notice true,
I believe it
functional
was
polygonal graphics.
Battle Arena Toshinden.
Oh yeah, Toshinden was good.
That's where it's at. That was the other. I went upstairs because somebody else wanted to use the N64 at the Cyber Cafe, and I played Battle Arena Toshinden for like 3 hours because nobody else wanted to play it.
I had Toshinden Remix for the Saturn. I was die-hard Saturn. The last time I was really, really fanboy for anything, like unapologetic, angry, super fanboy, was for the Sega Saturn. That was it, and it's like
that would cure anybody a fanboy this.
Looking back, it was the weirdest thing to be a fanboy of. It was just this strange console. But I remember walking by the game store and seeing Knights actually in the window.
This story warms my heart.
I saw Knights in the window, and I was looking at it. And up until then, I had always just like rented games on the weekends, like that's who I was. And I saw this game, and I was like, this is a guy flying around in a magical land, and I have to be a part of this. And I went in, and I was like, how do I play that? And they're like, well, it's only out in Japan right now, but you can buy the console, we'll sell you like an adapter, and we can import the game. I'm like 15. I'm like, how much does this cost? And they're like, it'll be around like $350, $400. I was like, well, we're gonna have to make this happen.
And you got a job.
And I got a job at that game store.
Look at that.
And that was it. That was like the turning point.
That's a short film that needs to be made. That's like the cutest thing.
And that's how I felt about Fantasy Zone on the Sega Master System.
Oh, Fantasy Zone was so good.
Because that was me at that age. Was going like, ooh, this is kind of neat. I don't really understand the logic of it. Okay, so here's my question: is we're talking about the N64, Pilot Wings, and Super Mario. I still consider that a pretty good launch because it's so hard to get a game like Super Mario 64.
Yes.
Something that you can really kind of get lost in, you can play for a long time, that might, even though not in that case, bridge the long gap before there's another sort of release of software. Well, I can't think of I'm trying to think how many launches was I actually satisfied with the lineup of games.
I remember not being into the PS2 launch. I remember it was like ATV
No, it was
Off-Road
SSX.
Fury,
It was SSX.
SSX, and Fantavision. And I loved Fantavision.
No, the launch titles that were great for the PS2 were DVDs.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is like if you didn't have a DVD player and you were looking for a new console and you looked at the Dreamcast and you looked at the PS2, you're just like, well, I'll just get a PS2.
Yeah,
Get a PS2.
And then
Dreamcast, what did the Dreamcast launch with?
Oh, that was, I think, the best launch lineup. Soul Calibur.
Yeah.
And it was NFL 99.
And Seaman.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But there was Seaman
too
that
bad.
eventually came with your Dreamcast. And then Sonic Adventure.
Seaman
Yep.
in my dream.
Which I know that in retrospect, we all know that Sonic Adventure, probably a lesser game than we saw it for.
Yeah.
But that was a nice...
It was so
It was
beautiful.
different games. You have an adventure game, you have a fighting game, you have a sports game, all of which seem so technically proficient.
Yeah.
And you rarely get anything that well-rounded at a launch.
And they were really, really quick with bulking up that lineup, I remember. Like, within like a very short period of time, you had Blue Stinger, which was not great, but it was there. And you had...
in retrospect, very few games on the Dreamcast were really great, but we just remember
Code
them.
Veronica came out really fast. Like, it was good. Like, things seemed to be like coming out really quickly.
I think another
it
thing
just
that-
kind of sputtered. Like, the Dreamcast just sputtered after a while.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing to take into account also is that we are kind of in the age of the early adopter and and fanboy culture. Like, it is so much like, if you don't have this thing at launch, you're not going to get it because you've had this panic drilled into you by
by the
you know,
N64 and by
Yeah.
the Wii. And
like, people have grown up with that. I remember, being a kid and like just the Super Nintendo and the Genesis were out, and like I don't know if they were new or what, but like if somebody had them and I was like, oh, they were just kind of there, they existed there, and if they had like a NES, it was like, oh, that's cool too, and if they had an Atari, I'd never seen one before, and I was really confused by it, but I still thought it was cool.
We had the loyal
But I mean,
coalition.
even in the era, they were confused.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
But I mean, if you go through, look at launch lineups, all this stuff that you kind of remember as being launch lineups, they weren't launch lineups. People just weren't so fixated on going out and getting this machine day one.
Yeah.
Launch window,
Yeah.
totally is what it was back
Yeah,
then. And
well,
now
I mean-
if you say launch window, people get so mad.
Yeah.
So mad. They're like, no, it has to be out
You
day
didn't
one.
have Amazon Prime. You didn't have pre-orders. You
Yeah.
didn't have lines out the door of the GameStop because, like, if you got it on Christmas, and at that point, a bunch of weeks had passed, and if you were going to get games, your mom went out and bought them. Like, that's...
Well, I mean, the PlayStation was the tipping point to that. The PlayStation turned it from birthday gift, Christmas gift into
Event.
consumer electronics thing that everybody wants.
I want the PS4.
Sony was brilliant at that marketing to turn, like, they made PlayStation into like a lifestyle brand. And I think that's where that sense of urgency. I mean, that's the first launch I remember, because that was 2000. It was at Metreon, and like it was a massive line. It was a big deal, and I think that's when those launch lineups started to feel like, hold on, all that hype, and like, yeah, SSX, really fun game.
Yeah.
But you're not seeing that promise that they had, given you for the past year of what, the emotion engine, what we can do with this, and now I'm skiing down very colorful hills, and I think that's where the issue is. The 360, I think, had one of the strangest launches because there are actually a lot of games, but no one of them really stood out. I mean, Call of Duty 2 was the big game, but it felt a little, lesser. It didn't feel definitive of the system. And, maybe that was what Perfect Dark Zero and Cameo were supposed to be. But, I mean, it's like, it seems really tricky, like, what makes the launch good? And that's why I go back to Super Mario 64. It's like, that's exactly what you want from a Nintendo console on day one.
Yeah. So I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna bait everybody. I'm gonna bait all the trolls. Who do we think is gonna have the stronger launch? Who's gonna come to E3 and announce the launch that we're more interested in?
I think it's Sony.
I think it's Sony, too.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I'm actually really hoping it's Sony because I don't want to. I mean, I secretly really hope that I don't have to buy two $400 boxes this year, because that is $800 if you add them together.
That math.
Way to go.
A lot of money.
Bringing the
go,
math
man.
in like that. Hey, high five.
I've been
Yeah.
You've been studying.
do this
That's
for
good.
do
That's good. That's good. That's
this
good.
for a living.